am Kristin Engvig, and this is the session on leadership created with the WIN community. This is a very exciting time. We all know that, and it's a time where we're stepping up our leadership. WIN began more than 22 years ago, very much actually for exactly that, of building bridges, of stepping up leadership for women and for connecting women around the world. We have worked with many organizations, and we have worked on this type of feminine leadership, of collaboration, of caring, of sharing, of doing things in a way that's not only about growth and fast pace, but also about creating resilience and community. So I would like to introduce our panelists here today. We have Nilima Bhat with us from India. She's the founder and director of Shakti Leadership. And our next panelist is Karen Se. She's the founder and CEO of International Bridges of Justice. She's both a minister and a lawyer. And following Karen, we have Gloria Burgess, who is a pioneering scholar, author, and thought partner. Nilima, shall I start with you today? Yeah, can you share some of the things that you and your organization is doing to create more just and equal society?
My approach, when I think of your WIN conference, day one is about what's happening in the world, day two is what's happening at work, and day three is what's happening with you. Yeah. And if I were to summarize, I think my approach and my work is what's happening with you. Yeah. So it's really about creating change in the world from the inside out, one life at a time, that goes on to impact one community at a time, and then ripple out from there. And that's why I realized my corporate experience, my yoga experience, I'm a meditation teacher, a spiritual guide, I have a corporate background, and I brought it all together to say, how can I create change makers? Because, if I want to really create impact in the world, I can just do this much. But if I create a whole cohort year on year of change makers who've done the hard work of inner transformation, then they can go out there and be far more impactful in a ripple effect as compared to me individually. So that is what I really do. My entire focus is about creating these inspired women leaders, because we want more women and more feminine leadership in the world, and through them bring, as you just said, prosperity, peace, and beauty, which is missing in the world, to restore balance. And this fellowship then comes together and then networks to see how can we go from me to we. How can we together have a far more amplified impact than what we are having on our own. So that in a nutshell is my approach. And we have had now 3 cohorts of these fellowship programs, and we have 51 women from all over the world. Each one has created a Shakti project in the world, a game-changing idea. And just an example, one woman who's from India, her Shakti project is a 9-month program where you step in, step up, and step out. And she stepped out with creating this cleft lip surgery for babies, who are otherwise ostracized or even killed. And she arranged for their surgeries. And in the 9 months, 71 babies have had their cleft palate and lip corrected. So their lives are transformed, their families are transformed, and so it's an exponential impact from there on. There's so many such beautiful examples, but yes, women bringing their deepest, highest self to the world in service. That's what I do.
Thank you, Nilima. It's so important, this thing that you're doing, to multiply, to start making all these ripples that go across the planet. Gloria, please, can you share some of your groundbreaking and pioneering work with all of us?
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much for organizing this conference, Kristin and Nilima. I really appreciate being here. So some of my work is a reflection, Nilima, of your work as well. I start with the inner transformation as well. And if you can imagine 3 concentric rings, with the center being the personal, and the next ring being culture, and then another ring being institutional, I actually work at all of those layers. So I begin with the individual. I look at the culture, if it's an organization or community, or a nation, if I'm working at that level. And then we look at the institutional, the structural things that hold injustices in place. And so I work at whatever scale is called for. And honestly, these days, every scale is called for, right? And so the clients that I work with, you know, some of them are very small NGO types. Some of them are huge global companies. And like I said, I also work at the national level. So I'm, you know, always looking at those 3 layers and how to get rid of some of the stickiness, the glue that holds these practices, these ideas, these mindsets, policies, all of these things in place. When I was a little girl, my mother, I grew up very poor, just deep, extreme poverty in the South of the United States. But my mother would always, you know, bring people in, welcome people to our house, even though we had practically nothing to eat. We would have, you know, meals of cornbread and buttermilk, or buttermilk and cornbread, right? But we were, we were always the welcome table. And I think about that as a metaphor for the work that you can do on a small scale or a large scale. And that's welcoming people to the table, not only to share bread with them, to share a meal with them, but also to bake the bread, you know. And if everybody at your table looks like you and thinks like you and eats the same kind of bread, then you need to invite new people to your table. So that's just a metaphor that I hold in my work.
Well, thank you, Gloria. That was so awesome. I love this. So not only bring people to the table, but make the bread together.
Yes.
This is, yeah, so it's about finding that common ground, having an activity you're doing together. This is so key. Thank you. Karen, I would like to ask you too, please share some of your story, what you are doing to make a difference in the world.
Thank you, Nilima, and thank you, Kristin, for organizing this. It's really great to have this time to come together. And as Gloria and Nilima were just saying too, I think it's very, very similar themes in terms of it being both inner work as well as outer work. So for myself too, I reached a sort of cross point in 1986 when I graduated from college, and I was trying to figure out, should I go to divinity school or should I go to law school? And for me, it was both. It's that, you know, it's spiritual, your inner transformation is absolutely critical to transformation of the world. And so is having lawyers and doing justice. So I ended up going to law school and then going back to divinity school. And so it's really a delight to be here because I think it's really both. For us, in terms of justice is our work. As some of you know, I run an NGO that I founded called International Bridges to Justice. And it is basically our understanding that everywhere throughout the world, every day in countries throughout the world, people are arbitrarily detained and tortured and denied access to a lawyer. And people are just, unfortunately, invisible. I mean, it's fantastic that in some ways, we feel, we were on a call just last week with our lawyers globally who are all working to protect people from being tortured by giving them a lawyer early on. And they showed me from Syria, they flashed on this graffiti in the middle, in the middle of the rubble, which I thought was really interesting because it was George Floyd. And I thought, I know that actually even people that we work with many of them have had family members killed and have been through such horrendous times. And yet they said, you know what, this is a very interesting time in history where we can all come together. And they say, we stand in solidarity with people everywhere who are giving voice to the voiceless, who are looking at how we can protect really the most disenfranchised in society. So I started as a public defender myself in the United States and then moved to Cambodia in 1994 and worked in Cambodia for 3 years, really trying to figure out ways of doing justice. And our methodology, and of course I'm completely biased because as I said, I started as a public defender, I absolutely believe that the protection of a lawyer early on gives people safety. And so I founded International Bridges of Justice in order to bring this worldwide. So we're a global movement worldwide. We are in over 40 countries with very much like-minded defenders who are finding ways to protect people who are accused of crimes so that they aren't silenced and invisible. Unfortunately, many people are silenced and invisible, and they're just, you know, there are hundreds of thousands of people who are tortured, and, you know, we don't even know where they are. But I'd say that we're moving it forward, and I'm very much with what Gloria said earlier, that it's about whatever you have, putting it on the table, sharing it, and then finding out ways that we can work together. What I have found to be so amazing about the defenders that we've worked with is that despite not having a lot of resources, they have always figured out how can we share what we have, and how can we make this a better society, a better and more just society.
Awesome. Thank you, Karen. I have learned a lot over these years that it's not only about our yeses, but it's a lot also about taking a stand, saying no to certain things, and how the change can happen that way. And Karen, you mentioned this of giving voice to the voiceless, to you know, make sure people are not silenced, and whether these are women or any or whoever. And I was wondering, what are you doing on a daily basis, all of you here, of it could be micro situations when these things are actually happening, because they could happen everywhere. So what is one thing that you are doing yourself on a daily basis to take a stand and to make the sort of a daily little difference?
I guess again, it's really a bothing process, because on a daily basis, our defenders everywhere stand up and they go to police stations and they provide the support of early access to a lawyer. So that's just the very concrete thing. That is the focus of our organization, early access to a lawyer, so people are not tortured, and in police stations and courtrooms. And that's really like the outside work. I'd say that especially during this time, and it's true all the time, but I think even more so now, that the world is just absolutely in chaos, you know, just crazy chaos, from COVID-19 to demonstrations for injustice, everything that's happening. I think it's particularly important that we spend more time focusing on really nurturing the love within ourselves that we have to give to the world. So I've sort of upped it even recently, with even being more deliberate about the time that I'm spending, you know, in meditation, in my spirituality, in journaling, because I think it's very easy to get caught in the fragmentation of the world and to not know, you know, which way do we go? And at the end of the day, it's about justice, and it's about love. It's about approaching justice through love. And so what I'm doing personally is I'm just doing more meditation as well.
Wonderful. And I thank you for sharing that. And it's interesting because this time of the COVID and lockdown has also, I think, given the chance to many of us to reflect more, meditate more. At least I feel that in my life too. So, and this word of love is so important. Gloria, I think you want to share some of that as well, what you are doing on a daily basis.
Absolutely, thank you. So, you know, I use my platforms as I am able, which means I need to stay current and metabolize as much as I can all of what's happening, and it seems to be happening faster and faster and faster these days. But I was just with a cohort of pastors, you know, experienced pastors in congregational ministry, and the course that I was teaching was called Pastor as Person. And pastors generally, especially if they're in seminary, they're, you know, kind of trained to hold themselves back, their personhood back, right? But to exegete the scripture and to present themselves in a certain way. And so this class was all about taking off the veneer, taking off the mask. And honestly, I had to redesign the course because of what was happening in the world. And so this, you know, this was my platform at that particular time. So keeping myself abreast and then working with people, meeting them where they are, and then just kind of pushing them a little bit farther than they might want to go, because that's what we need these days. We need people who are awake and responsible, and people who will lift their voice for what they care about and not just keep it inside.
Thank you for mentioning pushing. It's probably that what we call the tough love, right?
Yes, tough love.
Nilima, please share with us what you do.
That's a great segue for me. So, what I'm doing on a micro moment basis is walking the talk of what we teach in Shakti Leadership, which is the master key to move through life is presence, right? So constantly checking, am I centered? Am I present? Or am I absent? Have I been hijacked by, the ego self and emotions and thoughts, or am I present? And then to meet each moment from that place of presence. And we have a simple mnemonic to remember how to be a present leader. We say, be the wise fool of tough love. Okay. So this is the fourfold self combined to become a psychologically whole person and whole leader. So the wise is your parent, elder self. The fool is your curious, wondering, wondrous, magical child self. The tough is the inner masculine, and the love is the inner feminine. And it's interesting that it's so situational. There'll be a moment where, like, for example, I prefer to be very wise. And from time to time, I'll be reminded that I've lost touch with my fool, with my child, and I just need to lighten up and laugh, because what we are having around us right now is so ridiculous sometimes that no amount of wise and tough and love cuts it. You just have to become the innocent again and become foolish again and just lighten up. So I think that's what I'm kind of, on my own growth edge right now, saying, when do I need to be wise? When do I need to be tough? When do I need to be love? And when do I need to be foolish? Just this morning, because we have 2 days of a global event happening, and I had asked for someone to come and figure out the light that was flickering above me, and I couldn't have had this conversation. And he didn't show up for some reason, and I just had to get very tough with the person who I had asked to attend to that, and it was that person's responsibility to do so. But even as I was getting tough, a part of me was present and watching me getting tough. And when you're being tough from presence, the other person feels your love. So I think that's what I'm learning, that when I lose presence and I'm being tough, or I'm being love or wise or foolish without presence, somehow it lands badly or wrongly and can get manipulated, So everything comes back to, am I doing this from presence? So it's a moment to moment thing. And sometimes I'm good at it and sometimes I'm not so good at it. But, forgive myself and return to presence every time.
Nilima, this is awesome. And it also reminds me about when we're talking about now the new leadership that's asked for. And could it be that the new leadership we are talking about is on that route too, of being very present? Can you elaborate, please?
Totally. So this is where I go with the Shakti leadership model, that I was looking to create a model for conscious leaders. And the bottom line across all traditions of wisdom say, this is it: mindfulness, centeredness, presence. So we call it presence. But from presence, to truly be a whole person, to come into your full power, you need to become a whole person. And so your Shakti, your innate power, comes in these 4 bases: wisdom, strength, harmony, and perfection, right? So you've got to have access, like a little Tai Chi, you've got to know when to flex to which one. So I would say the wise fool of tough love is the archetype of a whole leader. And if you're missing any one of these, you are incomplete. And there's a chance you will trip up. So because this is a Jungian idea and it's a yogic idea, it comes from both Eastern and Western, and I'm sure across all wisdom traditions, that deep down, we are made up of these 4 core archetypes. And unless we have built the muscle on each one, we will not have a full capacity to address a leadership moment. So yeah, I would say, you know, to come into your full power, you need to become a whole person, a whole leader, because the leader you are is the person you are. We can't show up and pretend we're like, you know, really tough leaders or good leaders if we haven't really done the inner work. So this is a quick thing I want to add. In my years of working with leaders, I began to see that they do all the good work, and they keep rising, but they rise to the level of their wound, something that is as yet unintegrated in their psyche. And then that unfinished part starts making them slide back down. And so, you know, the next course I must create is called Therapy for Leaders, which is how do they reconcile all these lost parts of self.
Thank you so much. I think this is what's so awesome, that we are on journeys. We are on these inner journeys, and we are on our outer journeys. And we at WIN, we also talk so much about this. We are on these inner outer journeys as individuals, but also in this community of women right now, we are also on collective journeys and collective leadership journeys, which is so awesome to think about, that around the planet there is another soul walking and having similar obstacles and similar possibilities. Karen, talk to us a little bit about the leadership you believe is needed in this very moment.
It's a very interesting time in terms of leadership. What happened, one of the things that happened with us, which I'm sure happened with everyone, is also why we're on the Zoom call now, is that we suddenly, you know, couldn't travel everywhere. And so we started doing global Zoom calls ourselves. And I think the most interesting part of that for me is I just realized for ourselves how many voices often weren't heard, because of just different reasons, and started being heard in a different context. So I think just in terms of the leadership that's needed now, there's a couple of things. One is that it's the time where we start to really listen to all voices, that we become very conscious of the fact that there are some voices that are heard more than others, and we need to hear all voices. And I think that's also related to respecting all intelligences. I think, Kristin, you started by saying that, that there's different kinds of intelligences. And I do think that for too long in this world, we have ranked and prioritized in a hierarchy what is intelligence. And there are places where linear intelligence is prized more than intuition or whatnot. And, for us to really move forward in this very broken world that we are looking at bringing together in terms of wholeness, it is about, I just read a comment, so distract me, but it's really about how we can respect our different intelligences and really give value to it. I think related to that also is, moving from a place of really this divisiveness, which I think is very, very much related to what many of us grow up with, which is a competition model, right? A scarcity model. There's only so much. So if someone's good, that means I'm not as good, or, that just all of this that happens. I think it's the leadership that's needed now is also about embracing a model that's not based on competition, but based on cooperation. And the last thing is, I think that it's about love. I think now more than ever, if we embrace a leadership that's based on fear, our world will destroy itself. We need to come back to the basics of who we are, and our humanity has to be based on love. So I'm very excited about leadership that embraces love as we all move forward, that embraces multiple intelligences, multiple voices, and realizing that, we are all just a beautiful rose, and one rose doesn't compare itself to the other rose and say, that rose is more beautiful, or this rose, we are each uniquely gifted when we are born into this world. You know, we are born with gifts, each and every one of us, and it might be different, but that's who we are, and we need to embrace our own roseness, and we need to embrace everybody else's too.
Thank you, Karen. Beautiful. So, wow, multiple intelligences and slowing down and so much love. Great. Gloria, what's your take on the leadership needed right now?
I truly believe that we need more creativity in our leadership. Years ago, I wrote a book called Dare to Wear Your Soul on the Outside, and I talk about the creative tenets and principles that undergird us anyway, whether we're conscious of these presences or not. So Nilima, I was really struck when you talked about presences. And so the armature that I'm talking about is really the presences of gratitude, which grounds us in the present, but it also connects us to the past and to the future. Mm-hmm. Presences like love, we've talked about that a lot. Presences like faith, and being able to take that first step, even when you can't see the whole picture, you can't see the whole staircase, so to speak. Presences, the integrity, and not just our own integrity, but looking at that me-we dynamic. And so looking at my own integrity, but also looking at the whole. Integrity comes from the root word integer, which is whole, right? And so we need to look at the collective as well as the individual and keep, the accordion just going back and forth and back and forth. Creative action is another presence, not just action, but action that is really generative and creative and that comes out of what's needed now, not what's worked in the past only, but what's needed now. And then the other presence that I write about and talk about a lot is legacy. In the Western culture, in particular, Northern Hemisphere Western culture, we tend to think about legacy as way out there or something that happens after you die. But in fact, we're creating our legacy every single day, every single moment. And so I think about this time, we've also spoken about archetypes. That this is the archetype of the visionary, of the creative, of the artist. And what's needed now in our leadership are all of those dimensions of the magi, right? The magician. And so the mnemonic that I think about for artistry is authenticity, for resilience, right? Trusting, giving trust, not having to earn trust, intuition, imagination, serving, truth-telling, resetting so that we can renew ourselves and so that we can restore ourselves. And that why is all about following yes, following the moment of yes, the energy of yes. So artistry, that's what's needed now.
So beautiful. Thank you, Gloria. And thank you, Nilima, Karen, and Gloria. You mentioned now on the leadership that's needed in this very moment. From Nilima, we heard very strongly the presence, and through presence, how you bring love with you, whether you are in a situation where you need to be tough or more gracious, let's say. And also she mentioned the importance of wholeness, bringing the inner and the masculine, feminine together, all the dimensions. So it's very, very interesting. And the healing journey that so many leaders are on, most people are on, and to make that conscious. Karen, wonderful, you mentioned all the different intelligences or intuitive intelligence, bringing love, being love, and taking time to nurture that in this very moment when there's so many things going on. And Gloria, thank you again for mentioning you too, the presence, and also the very exciting part of the artist and the need for the artist in this moment, the magician, the visionary, as we're staking out new leadership for a new time on a daily basis. So thank you to all of you.